Okay, so I'm here today with Kate Moebus, who is a registered psychotherapist. She has an extensive background in working with people in the field of mental health. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about how to take care of our own mental health and really cope with everything that we have going on right now in the world. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. So let's get started. So I just want to start by asking, with everything that's going on, what is one thing you're grateful for right now?
I'm really grateful for the supports that I have in life. So, a partner, my family. I'm also really grateful for the fact that we actually have technology to be able to connect with people who we may not have been able to see, um, you know, during times like this. Yeah. So I think just being able to stay connected with people as much as possible has really been helpful and I think important moving forward in particular.
Yeah, honestly, it would be a totally different world if we were kind of just dealing with landlines right now in terms of kind of even back to
Absolutely.
10 years ago, it would still be really different. So it's a really good perspective on it. So I want to kind of dive right in there. Your time is obviously valuable and we appreciate you lending some of it to us today. Obviously, there are a lot of people right now that are very worried. Everyone's very stressed out, dealing with a lot of anxiety. So what are some strategies that you would recommend on how, people out there that are struggling cope with everything you're dealing with right now?
Okay. So a couple of things. I think when we're dealing with anxiety just in general, it's really important for us to understand what that looks like for us, right? So what is our actual stress response? Oftentimes it's very similar to other people, but we're unique, right? So what does that look like? Could either be, insomnia or stress response could, for a lot of people, it resonates being like really angry or shutting down or sweating, that sort of stuff, right? So really being looking at what is our actual physiological response to anxiety, what are the thoughts that we're having, and from a CBT lens, how are we behaving as well? Because I think that if you're able to recognize your own warning signs, that gives us an opportunity to be able to step in earlier to become better at managing it, right? So again, to being able to look at that, like, okay, what is sort of, if I look at my continuum of behavior, for example, being able to say, all right, where am I sort of on my ladder right now? As we know, if we look at our ladder, kind of look at it as our behavior or anxiety ladder, where's the safest place on the ladder? It's always at the bottom, right? So being able to implement some of those tools to be able to stay as close as we can to being in control of ourselves is really important. And the thing I always like to highlight to people too is when we reflect on our physiological response, in particular to anxiety, one of the first things that goes is our breathing, right? If we're triggered by anything, one of the first things that go is it's breathing. And if we're not breathing correctly, we are not thinking rationally. And if we're not thinking rationally, of course, we're not going to be behaving rationally and so on, right? So step one, when we start to really become familiar with our warning signs, is start breathing. And the one thing I really always like using is called diaphragmatic breathing. Some people call it 4-square breathing. And I like this one for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a full regulated breath. So if we think of a box, right, it's even on all ends. So what we do is we get you to either visualize that box, or the other component is the counting, right? So inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. And I always find it interesting with clients because, especially in our first session when we talk about some strategies for managing anxiety, the first thing I always do is go over breathing, and it's just the look on people's face. They're like, seriously, I left work early to have a woman tell me that I need to breathe. But the reality is that it is so important. And, one of the other things with anxiety is about being in control and always asking yourself that question: what can I do in this moment, in this second, to get control over myself? Breathe. Because I guarantee it's the first thing that goes. And that's when our body, our fight, flight, and freeze, that, it enhances that, right? So we're sort of stuck in this tense state or whatever. So breathing 100% all the time. If you're finding yourself really getting elevated or escalated, just stop, take a deep breath, do it 4 times to begin with, get control over yourself.
Yeah. That's excellent. And it's one of those things that, as you've said, it sounds so simple. We'll just breathe it, breathe through it. But I think it's something that a lot of us would never think to do. I know myself, I have kind of the app on my iWatch, and you hit a little button that kind of says SOS. And I started doing it, and it actually works really well for me. If I'm driving around and I'm in a moment where I'm just kind of high stress and a lot of things are going around, in my mind, just kind of pull over to the side of the road. I hit the little button and it says SOS, and it's just a breathing exercise. And I'm amazed at how well that works just to calm you down in that moment. So I think that's an excellent example. And I really like what you said in terms of kind of being in tune and aware of, how your stress and your anxiety affects you, and that kind of, the visual of the ladder of in terms of kind of safety is down here, and being able to recognize what those signs are, because they're different for everyone. What are those signs in terms of when you're really getting to that edge, and then how do you kind of pull it back to, where a safe, more comfortable place is. So, and we can post a link to that box exercise you had as well for people to utilize. I think that's excellent. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's great strategy. So with that in mind, I'm seeing a lot of truthfully kind of funny memes on the internet, but when we think about it, it's not too funny that there are a lot of couples home right now with each other 24/7. Obviously there's a lot of people that are dealing with being off of work, kids are home, and there's just a lot going on in people's lives right now. And I think there's probably a lot of people that are experiencing some friction right now and tension in their relationships, just being together so isolated on top of one another. So what are some strategies or thoughts you have in terms of kind of for those people that are out there right now struggling within their relationship as a couple?
Absolutely. So a couple things with that. It kind of also goes back to the first question, just around like managing your anxiety, right? So you need to be responsible for you, right? So again, that is like self-care. That is you being on your own routine, or as a family routine, your own hygiene, sleep hygiene, physical hygiene, that kind of thing. Self-care, really, really important. And also like, just to kind of go back again to the breathing thing, that also gives you the opportunity to step back. It's kind of like what you were saying, stepping back for a second, getting control, but also being able to ask yourself, what's actually going on for me here, right? What's below the surface? So a lot of the time, like I always go to anger because I feel like it's very accessible for a lot of people. If you're feeling really angry, like what is actually below the surface, right? Anger is actually a secondary emotion. It's the primary emotion that we're really wanting to get to, right? Well, I'm feeling really angry right now because I'm very confused. I'm really sad. I'm, missing people in my life. I'm just feeling really overwhelmed at work, that kind of thing. And I think that if we're able to actually look at what's going on below the surface for us, it makes it easier for us to also communicate effectively with our partners, which I think is extremely important always, but particularly now when we're in a high stress situation where, for many people, there are lots of kids around, or people that you have to look after, right? Family members or elderly people, so on. So I think that keeping that in mind, right? That what is our ultimate goal here? Our goal is to really communicate effectively, because if we're not communicating effectively, it is just going to be constant chaos, a whole lot of escalated arguments, that kind of thing. So I think part of that too is being able to actually have an open conversation with your partner or whoever you're living with, really, or even, other family members or so on, even your kids. Again, both being aware of what are our warning signs, when do we know that we're escalating, so that we're able to remove ourselves, right? So using timeouts. We always think that that's something that we use with kids, but we need to, as adults, we need to use that as well, right? If you have two little kids, they're fighting and everything's fine for a while, and then they bite one and it just escalates from there. What do? We pick our kids up, we remove them from the situation, we sit them down, we help them get control of their breathing, we start asking them what's going on for you, what's happening, we help them kind of articulate what their feelings are, right? Same with us as adults. If we're up here, we're really escalated, we are not articulating what's going on for us at all, right? So again, coming back to what are our warning signs when we're in a bit of a conflict with a partner too, right? So could be things like, if you know that you're starting to raise your voice or you're starting to swear, that kind of thing. What is that really illustrating to you? Well, I know that for me personally, I start doing that when either I don't feel heard or I'm not feeling validated, right? So it's an inherent thing that we do. We just immediately start talking over the other person or raising our voice. It's like a power and control dance that we have, right? It's almost threatening. But certainly, like most people, for me, if someone's yelling at me or swearing at me, I am not listening to a word that they're saying. I'm just sitting here thinking about, what's the next thing that I'm going to say that's really threatening. And the bottom line is that we are not getting ahead if we're doing that, right? We are just creating a more chaotic situation at home. We're not communicating effectively. And, it's really important that we are cognizant of those things, but also having that plan in place to be like, you know what? I'm raising my voice and, this is really not helping the situation. I'm just going to step outside, or I'm going to go for a walk around the block. I need to cool my jets and come back, right? Yeah. Again, the goal being we really want to communicate effectively. So with that, like timeout, really important to have a plan in place, like clearly communicated with your partner, right? We need to be, and we also need to be accepting of that, right? If you're needing time out, go take it, right? You have to be able to rely on each other like that too. But being very clear in that, saying like, you know what, I'm just going to go for a drive for 20 minutes, half an hour. I'm going to go cool my jets, really think about what's going on for me and what, thinking ahead, how do I want to behave when I get back? But you really do owe it to your partner as well to use that time effectively too, right? So it's not really fair for you to exit for a half an hour or so, then come back and still be really upset and angry and reactive. So yeah, I think that's really important with couples in particular, is just sort of your own communication around that. And I think too, especially with kids, if you have kids in the home right now and your schools, obviously, things are really different for everybody. But being able to as well really kind of carve out what does that look like for us, like knowing that maybe, I need a break. I can only handle doing sort of one lesson in the morning. You need to come in and, and then I'll do lunch after or whatever. So really having that routine in place as well, really helpful for the kids. I think the other thing that's really been coming up a lot with families in particular right now is, it's a challenge. Right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people are not teachers. They have no interest in being teachers, that sort of thing, or beyond, being at home. But I think it's also, we have to be aware of the change that this is for kids, right? Children are very attuned to what's going on right now. They may not fully understand everything that's going on, but certainly they're aware, of the change that's going on, but also they don't like to do school at home, right? So it's a huge shift for everyone. And as much as, we need to be aware of our own stress response, we really need to be cognizant of our kids and what are their responses to what's going on, right? So if we're noticing a lot of really elevated behavior, crying and so on, we have to be okay with just, this is not the day. We don't need to do school today or this morning. Let's just call it a write-off and just let our kid kind of de-escalate, do some breathing, maybe let's do a little craft together or something, right? We really want to be aware of what's going on for them too, because it's really stressful as well. And really taking that time to help them learn about their emotions and what's coming up for them, and really validating, right? We really want to validate our kids, our partners, and ourselves. I really think it's key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot, I know I'm certainly one of them in terms of as parents, they're struggling with, now we've incorporated these lessons. So, the first few weeks, my husband and I, we were doing a lot of kind of fun activities. We kind of were figuring out, some teaching things we could do ourselves, but not too structured. And now, and you're probably hearing this from a lot of the clients you work with, is last week we started having to kind of implement more, structured learning. And as my son has told me, I'm the worst teacher ever and my school sucks and he wants to go back to his school. And I think that's something we're all starting to figure out is, we're not the teachers. He doesn't want to hear about, learning his numbers and things from mommy and daddy. He wants to be with his friends. He wants to be in the school environment. So I'm finding that something somewhat interesting to work through. And something I know in terms of strategies that myself and my husband Greg are doing is that for me, I like my time alone in my office. That's my kind of, that's my me space. So what we're doing is in terms of kind of, one person's doing some of the lessons and working with the kids while the other person takes a break. For him, he likes to go and kind of work out in the basement. So we're trying to kind of be in tune with, some days one struggling more than the other. We all have our good days and bad, and how to support each other through that. And I think, as you said, the kids are going through a lot right now, and, you know, different kids are handling it in different ways. And as parents, trying to find a way to support them, which actually leads to, in terms of, we touched on it a little bit, but, you know, what would you recommend as parents? You know, what do we say to our kids about all of this? You know, how much do we tell them versus what we don't tell them? And how do we, you know, somewhat protect them from what's going on in the world, but at the same point in time, you know, not lie to them or pretend that there isn't anything that we're dealing with. What would you recommend, or what are you recommending to clients, and how to talk to kids about what's happening?
So I think in general, even for ourselves, we really need to limit our exposure to what's going on. We need to rely on information that's accurate. We also, like I said before, we really need to limit, right? And I think with kids, you need to ask them, what have you heard? What do you know about what's going on right now? And kind of let them lead that conversation, right? We also want to be age appropriate, obviously, but reassuring. We really want to validate what they're feeling. Ask them open-ended questions. Let them get sort of exploring what's going on. What's that like for you to be right now? You know, what sort of changes are going on for you? I also think it's important, though, to be honest with them, right? Whether that's, you know, I actually am not sure. That's a great question. Why don't we try to figure that out together? But being really reassuring. I think it's also important to, again, with knowing what your kid is saying and understanding where they're coming from and what their knowledge base is. Let's not add to that, right? Let's not start to be like, well, actually, this is what's going on and so on. You don't want to frighten them. You don't want to add to the stress that's going on for them. But I think certainly being as honest as you can with your kids. But I think more importantly, letting them feel in control as well, like as far as, you know, what's going on for you and what do you know about it and that sort of thing as well. Sort of getting a greater sense of their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a little outside of the box question in terms of, you know, you might not have too much to add to this, but, you know, what are your thoughts in terms of, or is there many people in your field right now discussing, you know, what are the overall mental health impacts going to be on our children in terms of kind of, I know it's anyone's guess, but, you know, we have a society right now where kids are, you know, really going to be at home for probably, you know, 2 months. Is there anything in terms of kind of, you know, thoughts in terms of what you're going to expect to see from this next generation of kids as a result of the impacts of what's happening right now?
So a couple of schools of thought, but I want to kind of focus. You know, I think we can so easily go down that avenue of, you know, catastrophizing and so on. I actually think it's gonna be a positive thing. I think that for most families, this is obviously a lot of recalibrating going on in our family's dynamic and structure. But I know from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, though, it's interesting. Their kids are actually getting along. The family's a little bit more in tune with one another. I think it's important, though, as much as we can, is to also keep the kids connected with their friends. So whether that's like, you know, us as adults, you know, I know that for me personally, every night I connect with a couple group of friends. It's just something we do. Doing something like that for your kids, have a tea party or something, you know, talk to your parent friends and just saying, you know, can we set up a time for the kids to do, or even like watch a cartoon together or something, or even trying to do some classwork together, doing sort of like a group, something like that. I think continuing to try to maintain as much connection with others is extremely important. I do think that there are obviously going to be some residual effects of this, just I think more based around the fear and the unknown. But I do feel very optimistic that I think that kids are going to come out of this. Kids are extremely resilient. And I think as much as we can kind of keep things in context for them and maintain as much normalcy and routine in day-to-day life, I think that they're going to be okay. Same with us. I think as grown-ups too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we use, there's a kids messenger app that you can use. I don't know if you've heard of that, but in terms of kind of, we had my eldest, who's 6, set up on that. And when he started being able to connect with his friends, and he's got it on his iPad now so he can call them himself, we noticed that helped him a lot. He's very social. He was worried about his friends, wanted to make sure his friends were okay. So we've been finding that his ability to kind of interact with them independently and just check in with his friends has actually really helped, you know, in terms of kind of him just be of a little bit better spirit. So I think that's excellent advice.
I think that's a really good point that I actually forgot to mention. But like with kids in particular, they're actually far more concerned about other people than themselves, right? So they might worry about grandma and grandpa, or, you know, great aunts, so on, or their friends, right? So again, that whole connection piece and that routine of like, let's call grandma and grandpa on Tuesday nights, or let's have dinner with them, or, you know, Wednesday or whatever we call aunt so-and-so, that kind of thing, right? But reassuring them and saying everyone's okay, you're okay, that kind of thing. And
and I think that's, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it, is that they connect things, even if we're not necessarily saying things or exposing them to the news, they kind of pick up on our conversations. And that's how it came up is my eldest son, Robert, said, you know, Mommy, what happens if my friends are having play dates with each other and someone gets sick? So that's where we're like, okay, well, you know, let's check in with our friends and see what they're up to. And, you know, that made him feel more comfortable that his friends were okay. So in terms of kind of, so for people who are out there right now that are looking for additional support, looking to speak to someone, what are some of the services that people can access right now in terms of people that are looking for, you know, either counseling or to speak with some professionals at the moment?
Yep. So right now is a very interesting time in this profession because things are evolving on a daily basis, as it is in most people. You know, I know certainly like for real estate, for example, too, right? Every day is different. But I do know, for example, locally, our walk-in clinic at the mental health clinic at NHH, they're still providing service. My understanding is that, you know, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the regular day, I believe you call in and they'll put you on a list, and then you will get a phone call from one of the counselors on duty at that point. So that service is still up and running. The same with Rebound, which is for children and youth. Just call their main office and they'll have someone reach out as well. And again, with youth, I know Kinark still has a crisis line up and running. And I mean, certainly if people are feeling suicidal, self-harm, any of that kind of thing, go to a hospital, call an ambulance or police. But that said too, I know that like with EAP, so any sort of insurance, lots of companies are offering that kind of service through their, you know, as usual, but it's just online. So they'll connect you with, you know, like for example, I know Northumberland Community Counseling often will do a lot of EAP for people, and the pickup time should be okay. I know the organization or the agency I work with right now, we're still seeing people, we're still taking on new clients. Obviously, it's a real shift for us now doing things online, but those things are certainly available still. And also, you know, being in touch with 611, you can call them, they can give you additional resources. But yeah, I think for the most part, if you just connect with your local hospital, or if you would just do like a generic sort of search, you'll be able to connect with a counselor fairly easily.
Good. And for people who are looking to connect with you, where can people find you?
So just connect with Nurturing Health. Just search us on Google, you'll find us, and our referral form is up there. If you're specifically looking for me, you can always just sort of add, I wanted to see Kate. And yeah, I mean, I will probably be in touch within, you know, probably if you do it this week, I'll be in touch by the end of the week at the very latest. The other thing I also like want to add to is just looking for even like group counseling. I think that there's a lot to be said for group counseling, and particularly in this environment that we're in right now. People really like, we're missing connecting with people, and there's a lot to be said for getting that support and guidance from people around. So I know that there are a few people talking about doing some group work. It's again all about what kind of platform can we actually use, just based on our college guidelines. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next few weeks if that becomes a little bit, you know, something that's more available for people.
Oh, that's great. And I think that's something in terms of kind of definitely something that, you know, I think again, that human interaction that people are looking for. So and obviously I'm working from home, as you can tell. So with that being said, what's one thing you're looking forward to most in terms of kind of when this is all said and done? What's the one thing that you can't wait to, you know, get out there and do, or something that you're really missing that you're looking forward to?
There's a lot. I think just being with friends, you know, like just actually being able to sit and be in physical presence with people. I think even like with work, I'm really glad that I'm able to start doing this, using Zoom or whatever, use a different program, but being able to connect with clients. But there is definitely, it's not the same, right? There's really something to be said about being in the presence of another person. But yeah, and I think just seeing family. I have really young nephews, and one of them's already starting to walk, and he's talking, and it's sort of like, oh, like I'm missing that. Even though I'm able to see stuff, it's still, I'm not there. I'm not able to, hold him and that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that.
That can be tough. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being here today. We'll certainly post your contact information as well, and you take care. And again, thank you for all you're doing. I know that you're probably spending a lot of time with clients right now like this, supporting a lot of people in terms of getting through, the coming weeks and the days. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing some of your information with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. Thanks. Take care.
Take care.